Right now, I want you to notice exactly what your head is doing. Like, are you looking down?
You probably are.
Yeah, exactly. Is your chin tucked toward your chest while you listen to this? Maybe you're staring at a phone or looking down at a desk. Because usually when we talk about architecture or the spaces we inhabit, we mostly talk about aesthetics, you
Right,
know?
like how a building looks, the materials, the history behind it.
Exactly. But today, we are talking about what a building physically forces your body to do. In this deep dive, we are going to uncover how ancient emperors, medieval bishops, and, well, our own neurobiology conspire to basically hack the human mind using nothing but vertical space.
It is such a fascinating
It
premise.
really is. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Huh.
Because we're looking at a visually stunning, intellectually dense presentation today titled The Architecture of the Upward Gaze. And this isn't just an architecture lesson.
Yeah.
We're going to see how the physical angle of your neck completely alters your brain chemistry and your emotional state.
Yeah, and when you look at the historical data and the architectural records we've gathered from the source, um, the central argument that really emerges is that human civilization's obsession with the vertical was never like a mere aesthetic preference.
Right. We didn't just build high because it looked pretty.
Exactly. Yeah. It was a calculated psychological strategy right from the very beginning. And to really understand the mechanics of this, we have to start by looking at how extreme height was initially, well, weaponized to project absolute untouchable power.
And weaponized really is the perfect word for it when you dig into the history. If we go back to ancient Persia, specifically the Zagros Mountains around 500 BCE, you find King Darius.
Right.
He was trying to hold together this massive, volatile empire, and his solution was something called the Behistun inscription. And I have to say, when I was looking through the notes on this source, it sounded like a set piece from an Indiana Jones movie.
Oh, totally.
It's this colossal, elaborate carving on a sheer cliff face, literally hundreds of feet in the air.
Yeah. And the placement of that carving follows what architects and historians recognize as a very deliberate elevation strategy blueprint. The content of the carving is essentially, well, it's a massive billboard.
Right.
It's a trilingual archive, so it's written in Old Persian, Elamite, and Babylonian. And the stated goal was to unify a sprawling, multi-ethnic empire under one common narrative of the king's divine right to rule.
Which makes sense on paper.
It does, but the sheer logistics of its placement are what reveal its true function. It features a 100-meter gap, a complete physical exclusion zone.
Okay, this is the part that just stopped me in my tracks. Because once the artisans finished carving this massive unifying document into the cliff, King Darius ordered the scaffolding and the stone stairs to be completely destroyed.
Yep, they systematically removed any physical means of ever reaching it again.
Which is just a wild level of commitment. It's like building an ancient, unhackable cloud server. He creates the ultimate backup of his legacy and then literally destroys the physical access port so no one can ever alter it.
That's a great way to put it.
But wait, this is where I was genuinely confused. If you are King Darius, right, and your entire goal is to project absolute power over your subjects and unify them with this text, why place your most important unifying document in a place where literally no human being can read it? That seems entirely counterproductive.
I mean, it seems counterproductive to us today because we equate communication with legibility, right?
Yeah, like a text has to be read to do its job.
Exactly. But what's fascinating here is the psychological power of that exact exclusion. The target audience for the Behistun inscription wasn't his mortal subjects at all.
Wait, really?
Yeah, the records explicitly show the intended audience was Ahura Mazda, the supreme creator god in Zoroastrianism. Darius was speaking to the divine.
Yeah.
So by making the text completely unreachable by humans, you are enforcing a physical reality of submission. You don't need the peasant farmers or even the rival lords to write the specific words. You just need them to stand at the base of that mountain, look up at an impossible height, and realize how impossibly small they are. It is the physical manifestation of untouchable authority.
Okay, that makes so much sense. The medium is the message. The sheer cliff itself does the intimidating. And they didn't just, leave that psychological trick out in the remote mountains. They brought it right into the capital cities.
They absolutely did.
You see this translated into Persepolis, specifically in the halls of the Apadana. They essentially built artificial sheer cliffs into ceremonial urban spaces.
Yes, the Apadana was a massive audience hall. So imagine visiting dignitaries, warlords, emissaries from 23 different provinces marching into this space. The architecture is engineered so that these powerful figures are physically forced to crane their necks upward just to view the royal inscriptions.
The ones carved into the tops of these towering columns, right?
Ex
So it's a physical requirement. Like, you can't navigate the space or take in the messaging without tilting your head back.
And that physical necessity, the actual craning of the neck, induces a reflex of awe and self-diminishment. The architecture stabilizes imperial power without a single spoken word, without a single sword being drawn.
That is wild. The building does the subjugating for you.
It does. The observer is locked in a state of static, eternal subjugation simply by moving their body through the environment the king designed.
It's an overwhelming, crushing vastness. It's designed to make you feel like an ant. But then, as we move forward in the historical record of this deep dive, there's this massive pivot, because if you look at the 12th century, you see the rise of Gothic cathedrals.
Right.
And if the ancient Persians used extreme height as a crushing exclusionary weapon, these later structures feel entirely different. The fundamental logic of the vertical space evolved from exclusion to inclusion.
Yeah, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, it represents a radical shift in human thought. The medieval builders of Gothic cathedrals completely reversed that Achaemenid logic.
Just to clarify for anyone listening, when you say Achaemenid, we are talking about that ancient Persian empire founded by Cyrus and ruled by Darius, right?
Precisely, yeah.
Yeah.
The Persian Empire's approach was to crush the viewer with unyielding, solid mass. But the Gothic builders went the opposite route. Instead of hiding the truth in unreachable heights and destroying the stairs, they engineered what researchers in the source term a spiritual vacuum.
A spiritual vacuum. That's such a brilliant way to describe it, because when you walk into an ancient Persian monument, you feel pushed down into the dirt. But when you walk into a Gothic cathedral, say Amiens or Notre Dame, you don't feel crushed at all.
No, you feel pulled upward.
Exactly. They utilized rib vaults and pointed arches not to intimidate you, but to serve as a massive invitation to ascend. They wanted to take an ordinary peasant and transform them into a participant in the heavenly realm.
And they employed a very specific set of structural tools to achieve this. You have to remember, the medieval church was largely dealing with an illiterate populace.
Yeah.
You couldn't just hand them a theological treatise to read.
Right. The building itself had to be the teacher.
Exactly. The source calls it the didactic mechanics of the stone Bible. The stone had to communicate complex theology.
And the mechanics they used are brilliantly manipulative. Like, take the spires, for example. The extreme height of cathedral towers was technically necessary for acoustic dominance, right?
Yeah, they needed to ring bells to broadcast the time and calls to prayer over the noise of a dense, sprawling medieval city.
But it wasn't just about sound. It was about hacking human sight. There is this detail we uncovered about the statuary at portals, like at the Cathedral of Chartres, that is so counterintuitive.
Oh, it is a brilliant optical illusion. It shows how deeply they understood human perception.
They intentionally distorted the statues, like they artificially stretched the figures of the saints and kings carved into the stone. If you were to somehow take one of those statues down and look at it straight on, at eye level, it would look bizarre.
Totally bizarre, like a funhouse mirror reflection.
Right. All long limbs and stretched torsos. But why would they do that?
Because they knew exactly where the observer would be standing. The architects knew you would be standing on the ground looking up. So that artificial elongation mechanically forces your eyes to travel upward along the length of their bodies.
Oh, wow.
They're literally dragging your gaze up the facade of the building, seamlessly correlating physical head elevation with moral elevation.
And they built in defense mechanisms, too, like the gargoyles. I always just thought of gargoyles as cool, spooky decorations, you know.
A lot of people do.
But the source points out they function as psychological defense mechanisms against atmospheric demons. The architecture creates this narrative journey for your eyes. You start at the profane ground, your gaze is pulled up past the demons, the gargoyles, and finally reaches the pristine, untouchable divine realm at the spire.
It is a complete architectural narrative.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting, because when you put these two eras side by side, you have radically divergent logic.
Very much so.
On one side, you have the ancient Persian monuments. Their logic is exclusion, they are instruments of absolute power, and the visual effect is a crushing vastness. On the other side, Gothic cathedrals. Their logic is inclusion, they are tools for spiritual education, and then the visual effect is a weightless spiritual pull.
Right.
But despite those opposite intentions, crushing a subject versus spiritually elevating a believer, the source states that both structures cause the exact same reaction in the human body. How is that possible?
It's a great question, and the answer actually lies entirely outside the realm of architecture or art history. To understand how opposite intentions yield the exact same bodily reaction, we have to look inside the human brain. The builders of antiquity and the Middle Ages were, in fact, unwitting neuroarchitects.
Meaning they had no idea why it worked on a biological level, just that it consistently did work. They figured it out through empirical observation.
Exactly. They discovered a biological backdoor into human consciousness. And the key to this backdoor is thoroughly explained in the neuropsychological theories of Fred Previck, which this source relies on heavily.
Okay.
His research on spatial orientation demonstrates that the human brain features two completely distinct visual processing streams. And critically, these two streams are directly linked to the physical angle of our neck and the direction of our gaze.
Okay, I want to make sure I'm really tracking with you here because this is the core of the whole deep dive for anyone listening. We essentially have two distinct physical spaces we interact with, the downward gaze and the upward gaze. Let's look at the downward gaze first. The technical term for this is peripersonal space.
Yes, peripersonal space is the immediate, tangible area surrounding your physical body, roughly the space within arm's reach.
Okay.
Evolutionarily speaking, this space is tied to immediate survival. It's the space where our ancestors grasped tools, where they foraged for roots or berries, and where they interacted physically with their immediate environment.
So if I'm understanding this right, looking down into that peripersonal space activates a specific neural pathway, the cholinergic nervous system,
Right.
which makes complete evolutionary sense. If I am staring at the ground, I am probably looking for a snake or trying to start a fire or scanning for immediate threats. It's a survival loop.
Precisely. And because of that evolutionary necessity, the cognitive state associated with that downward cholinergic activation is highly specific. It induces a state of melancholy, hypervigilance, and problem focus.
So you are literally feeling down because your brain is locked into a high alert, problem-solving mode.
Exactly. It is a vital state for keeping you alive in a dangerous environment, but it is not a state of emotional expansion or peace.
But then you tilt your head up. You enter what is called extrapersonal space. This is distant space. The horizon, the sky, the tops of mountains. And looking up into this space triggers an entirely different neurobiological system.
It activates the dopaminergic nervous system. Dopamine is fundamentally a reward chemical, and evolution tied it to extrapersonal space for a very specific reason.
Which is?
Well, to survive long term, early humans needed a chemical incentive to look beyond their immediate safety zone. They needed motivation to scan the horizon, to migrate, to navigate by the stars, and to plan for the future.
So they needed a biological reward for being curious.
Exactly. Therefore, the upward gaze is intimately tied to future planning, abstract thought, and transcendent experiences. When your head tilts up and engages that dopaminergic pathway, your cognitive state instantly shifts to one of creativity, hope, and abstraction.
So, by simply forcing the human head to tilt upward, whether it's to look at an unreachable Persian inscription carved into a mountain or an elongated Gothic saint on a cathedral, these builders bypassed rational thought entirely.
They did.
They didn't have to convince you of their power or their theology. They just hijacked your brain's dopaminergic system, instantly engaging the circuits responsible for awe, submission, and transcendence. It's a physiological hack.
It is an incredibly potent physiological hack, and we can actually map out exactly how that biological hack functions in real time. Neurologists have identified a 6-step cycle that the source calls the awe engine.
The awe engine.
Right. This is the step-by-step process of how the physical act of looking up generates that profound bodily feeling of awe that just leaves us speechless.
Yes, let's walk through the awe engine because seeing the mechanics of this makes it so clear. So step one is the massive vertical stimulus. You are walking through a narrow city street, you turn a corner, and suddenly you encounter a towering cathedral, or you step out of a forest and see a sheer cliff face.
Which forces step 2, your head tilts up.
Yeah.
It's an involuntary physical posture required to take the stimulus in.
Right. And as soon as your chin goes up, you hit step 3, dopaminergic activation. Your gaze enters extrapersonal space, and the brain's reward and abstraction network fires up.
Yep.
But then we hit step 4, which is accommodation. And I have to admit, wait, I was a little stuck on this step when reading through the research. Like, how does struggling to process something vast actually do anything to your ego? That feels like a massive leap.
It's a really great question. Think about what happens when your brain is suddenly forced to comprehend an object that defies its everyday frame of reference. a cathedral ceiling that looks like it's floating, or a mountain that disappears into the clouds.
Okay.
The brain literally struggles to accommodate the sheer scale of the visual data. It requires massive cognitive bandwidth to process that extra personal stimulus.
Oh, okay, I get it now. It's like a computer processor. Imagine you are running a massive, beautifully rendered, incredibly complex 3D video game landscape on an old, outdated laptop.
Yeah, exactly.
The CPU just freezes up. The fan starts whirring violently. The brain is so overwhelmed by the vastness of the architecture or the mountain that it simply doesn't have the bandwidth to process everything else it usually worries about.
That is the perfect analogy. Because the brain is struggling so hard to process the sheer scale of what it's seeing, it has to compensate by shutting down non-essential background applications to keep the system from crashing.
Wow.
And in the human brain, the primary background application it shrinks down is the self,
Yeah.
the ego.
That is fascinating. Okay, so that leads directly into step 5, the small self. The ego diminishes to free up cognitive memory. And the source notes that the shrinking of the self promotes massive pro-social connection.
Right.
You stop worrying about your own minor problems, your ego, your daily anxieties. Because you are in the presence of something incomprehensibly large, you feel connected to humanity because your individual problems suddenly seem incredibly tiny.
And that shrinking of the ego and sudden sense of connection leads to the final stage, step 6, biological relief. And what is truly remarkable here is that this biological relief is not just some poetic abstract concept.
It's physical.
It is measurable in a laboratory. Experiencing awe through this forced upward gaze literally causes a physical reduction in a specific inflammation marker called interleukin-6.
And interleukin-6, just to be clear for everyone, is a protein produced by the body that causes inflammation. It's heavily linked to chronic stress, fatigue, and long-term diseases. So having high levels of it means your body is essentially under constant attack from stress.
Correct. So when the awe engine runs, it actively lowers those markers. A physical reduction in bodily inflammation just from tilting your head back and looking at something huge. The architecture is literally healing you on a cellular level.
That is absolutely incredible. But this brings up a really dark thought. If looking up heals us, if it triggers hope, expands our creativity, and builds pro-social connection, what happens when a society simply stops looking up entirely?
Well, this is the crux of the modern deficit outlined in the source. We are currently facing a severe environmental shift because in our highly digitized reality, human vision has become relentlessly, almost exclusively, locked into the peripersonal space.
We are just staring at glowing screens held right in our hands, or we are hunched over laptops all day.
Precisely. We have adopted a permanent downward orientation. And as we learn from the evolutionary biology of the visual streams, looking down keeps us trapped in the cholinergic system. We have created a society-wide cholinergic loop.
A stress loop.
Yeah, this permanent downward gaze correlates directly with the narrowing of thought, increased societal stress, and the chronic hyperactivation of our immediate problem-focused neurobiology. We're constantly scanning for snakes in the grass, but the grass is our social media feed.
So what does this all mean? I was wrestling with this for hours after reviewing the data because, there's a massive disconnect here. We think of our smartphones and our laptops as these magical portals, right?
Yeah.
Mentally, we feel like we are exploring the infinite. They connect us to vast amounts of abstract information, to distant spaces, to people across the globe. We feel like we are engaged in extrapersonal space. But biologically...
Biologically, it's a completely different story.
Right. Our physical bodies just think we are holding a physical tool. The body thinks we are holding a rock, grasping for immediate survival. We are totally tricking our own biology. Our mind thinks it's expanding, but our physical posture is keeping our body trapped in a cholinergic stress loop.
That is a profound contradiction, and it perfectly explains the pervasive sense of modern exhaustion and burnout. Your brain is trying to process abstract infinite data, but your physical posture is telling your nervous system to prepare for an immediate, tangible threat.
You are stuck in a constant state of survival mode.
Completely cut off from the dopaminergic relief and the healing effects of the awe engine.
Which brings us to the most important, actionable takeaway for you, listening to this deep dive right now. How do you escape this trap? Because, we can't all just throw our phones into the ocean and move into a Gothic cathedral.
As nice as that sounds, no. But the science provides a very clear, actionable answer. Escaping this peripersonal trap requires conscious physical intervention. You cannot think your way out of a physiological posture.
You have to physically move.
Yes, deliberately looking up. Whether that means intentionally standing at the base of a modern skyscraper, visiting a historical monument, or simply stepping outside and tilting your head back to look at the open sky is not merely a poetic suggestion. It is a necessary neurobiological reset.
It provides a literal energetic refreshment. By actively choosing to tilt your chin up, you manually trigger the dopaminergic system. You reconnect yourself with the vastness of the extrapersonal world. You force your brain to run the awe engine, you shrink the ego, and you physically flesh out that stress and inflammation.
Ultimately, what the data shows us is that the vertical is not merely a dimension of physical space, it is a dimension of consciousness. For millennia, humanity intuitively recognized this, building upward to connect the mortal with the divine, the immediate with the distant, and the fleeting with the eternal.
It's a beautiful thought.
It is. Today, the simple physical act of lifting our gaze remains our most immediate and powerful mechanism for reclaiming our mental expanse.
It really makes you completely reevaluate the space around you and how you move through it. And I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to ponder based on everything we've just explored. If our physical posture completely dictates our neurobiology, if the angle of our neck dictates our capacity for hope, our creativity, and our connection to others, and our modern world is increasingly designed to keep our heads tilted downward at glowing rectangles, are we accidentally engineering a society that is biologically blocked from experiencing transcendence? It's a heavy question to mull over, but it means that the next time you feel stressed, overwhelmed, or creatively blocked, the most advanced neurohack you can possibly deploy might just be stepping outside, untucking your chin, and looking up.